Captain Lee Daho stood on the bridge of the UES Indomitable, watching the stars drift past through the main screen. The ship was massive by human standards, but tiny compared to the alien vessels that filled Federation space. For 50 years now, humans had been part of the Galactic Federation. They were still the new kids on the block. Most of the other species had been traveling between stars for thousands of years. They had built great cities that floated in space and created technology that seemed like magic. Humans were different. They came from Earth, a world so dangerous that other aliens called it a death world. The weather was wild, the animals were deadly, and natural disasters happened all the time. But somehow humans had survived and thrived. Captain called Lieutenant Kim Woo-jin from his station. "I'm picking up something strange." Lee walked over to the communications console. Kim was young but smart, and he had good instincts. If he said something was strange, it was worth checking out. "What kind of strange?" Lee asked. Kim frowned at his screen. "It's a signal, sir. But it's not like anything in our databases. It's weak and broken up, coming from the dead zone." Dr. Park Hana looked up from her medical station. She was the ship's doctor, but she also knew more about alien life than almost anyone. "The dead zone? Nothing lives out there. The Federation marked it as empty space centuries ago." Lee nodded. The dead zone was a large area of space near the galaxy's edge. Ships avoided it because there was nothing there. No planets, no resources, no life. Just empty darkness. "Can you clean up the signal?" Lee asked Kim. "I'm trying, sir, but it's using an old format. Really old. Like older than the Federation old." That got everyone's attention. The Federation had existed for over 3,000 years. What could be older than that? Dr. Park walked over to look at Kim's screen. "Let me see the signal pattern." She studied the data for several minutes. Her face grew pale as she worked. "Captain," she said quietly, "this signal contains biological markers, DNA patterns from a species I've never seen before." "Could it be a new species?" Lee asked. "No, sir. The patterns are ancient, like they've been drifting in space for a very long time." She paused. "There's something else. The signal is repeating the same message over and over." "What does it say?" Dr. Park's hands shook as she input the translation. "The Devourers have returned." A chill ran down Lee's spine. He had never heard that name before, but something about it felt wrong. Dangerous. Meanwhile, on the Federation capital world of Zentara Prime, Ambassador Jang Mirai was having a very different kind of bad day. She sat in her office reading reports. That made no sense. 3 colonies in the Outer Rim had gone silent in the past week. Not destroyed, just silent. Their automated systems were still working, but no one was answering calls. Ships sent to investigate found empty worlds, with all the buildings intact, but no people anywhere. Jang had been Earth's representative to the Federation for 10 years. She had seen conflicts before, but they were usually solved with talks and trade agreements. The galaxy had been peaceful for so long that most species had forgotten how to fight real wars. Her assistant, a blue-skinned alien named Orcs, brought her more reports. "Ambassador, we have another problem. The mining station at Kepler 7 has stopped responding." "When?" 6 hours ago. They were in the middle of sending their weekly report when the transmission just cut off. Yang looked at the star maps on her wall. Kepler 7 was 3 systems away from the other missing colonies. Whatever was happening was spreading. Have the Federation Council heard about this? Corex made a sound that meant sort of in his language. They think it's just equipment failures. They say the outer rim is always having technical problems. Jang wanted to scream. The Federation Council was made up of old, wise aliens who had lived for hundreds of years. They were smart and experienced, but they moved slowly. They liked to study problems for months before taking action. But people were disappearing. Back. On the Indomitable, Captain Lee was making a decision that would change everything. Kim, set course for those coordinates. We're going to investigate. Sir, Dr. Park said carefully, we don't have orders to leave our patrol route. No, we don't, but we have orders to investigate anything that might threaten Federation space. This qualifies. Lieutenant Kim looked nervous. Captain, the dead zone is really far from any help. If something goes wrong, then we deal with it, Lee said firmly. That's why we're out here. Dr. Park smiled, despite her worry. This was why. She liked serving with humans. Other species would have called for backup, formed a committee, and spent weeks making plans. Humans just went and did what needed to be done. All hands, prepare for hyperspace jump, Lee announced over the ship's communication system. The Indomitable turned toward the dead zone and vanished into hyperspace, leaving behind only empty space where it had been. None of them knew that at the very edge of the galaxy, something vast and hungry was moving through the darkness between stars. It had been traveling for a very long time, searching for a new home. It had found many galaxies before, and each time it had fed until there was nothing left. This galaxy looked promising, full of life and energy. The entity could sense billions of thinking beings, all unaware of what was coming for them. Soon, it would begin feeding again. The last message from the ancient signal continued to repeat into empty space. The Devourers have returned. The Devourers have returned. The Devourers have returned. But no one was listening anymore. The Indomitable dropped out of hyperspace near coordinates that should have been empty. Instead, Captain Lee and his crew found themselves staring at something impossible. "What in the hell is that?" Kim whispered. Floating in space ahead of them was a massive structure built into an asteroid. It was clearly alien, but unlike any Federation technology they had ever seen. The metal was dark and smooth, with strange symbols carved deep into its surface. Parts of it were clearly damaged, as if someone had left in a great hurry. "It's old," Dr. Park said, studying her scanner readings. "Really old. I'm reading power signatures, but they're faint. Something is still running in there, but barely." Lee made his decision quickly. "Prepare an away team. Dr. Park, you're with me. Kim, keep scanning for any other ships in the area." "Sir?" Kim said nervously. "What if whatever built this is still inside?" "Then we'll deal with it," Lee replied. He had learned long ago that humans survived by facing problems head-on, not by running away from them. The away team suited up and took a shuttle to the alien station. As they got closer, they could see that the structure was enormous, easily the size of a small city. Docking bays were carved into the asteroid, designed for ships much larger than anything humans had built. They found an airlock that still worked and entered the station. The inside was dark except for emergency lighting that cast eerie shadows on the walls. The air was breathable, but it tasted old and stale. "This way," Dr. Park said, following her scanner. "I'm detecting a life sign, faint, but definitely there." They walked through corridors lined with empty rooms. Everything was covered in dust, as if no one had been here for centuries. But Dr. Park's scanner kept leading them deeper into the station. Finally, they found what they were looking for. In a large chamber at the station's center was a single pod made of crystal and metal. Inside, they could see a figure, humanoid, but clearly not human. The being was tall and thin, with pale blue skin and long silver hair. "It's some kind of sleep pod," Dr. Park said. "The life support systems are failing. We need to wake them up now or they'll die." Lee nodded. They had come this far. Time to take the next step. Dr. Park worked on the pod's controls while Lee kept watch. After several tense minutes, the crystal began to clear and the lid opened with a soft hiss. The being inside opened large golden eyes and sat up slowly. She looked around in confusion, then focused on the humans standing nearby. Who are you?" she asked in perfect Federation standard. "We're humans," Dr. Park said gently. "We found your signal and came to help. What's your name?" "I am Nixandra, last of the Veltar." She tried to stand, but was too weak. "How long was I asleep?" "We don't know," Lee said. "But your station looks like it's been abandoned for a very long time." Nixandra's eyes filled with sadness. 1,000 years. I was supposed to sleep for 1,000 years, and then... She looked around the empty chamber. "Where are the others? Where is everyone?" Dr. Park helped her sit up properly. "You're the only life sign we detected. Can you tell us what happened here?" The alien woman was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was filled with ancient fear. "The Devourers came. They consumed everything. Every world, every ship, every living thing in our space. We tried to fight them, but our weapons were useless. In the end, we could only build a barrier to keep them out and hope it would hold." "What are the Devourers?" Lee asked. "Death itself," Nixandra replied. "They come from the space between galaxies, consuming the life force of entire worlds. They don't just kill, they feed on the very essence of life until nothing remains but empty shells." Back on the Indomitable, Kim was trying to contact Federation Command when his sensors detected something that made his blood run cold. "Admiral Ko, this is Lieutenant Kim on the Indomitable. I need to report something urgent." Admiral Ko Sung-jin's face appeared on the communication screen. He was old for a human, but his eyes were sharp and alert. "What is it, Lieutenant?" "Sir, we've lost contact with 12 Federation outposts in the last 6 hours. They're all in the outer rim, and they're all going dark in sequence, like something is moving from system to system." Ko's expression darkened. "What kind of going? Dark?" "Complete communication failure, sir. No distress signals, no warnings, nothing. 1 minute they're there, the next minute there's just silence." Meanwhile, on Zentara Prime, Ambassador Jang was having an emergency meeting with the Federation Council. The council chamber was a huge circular room where representatives from hundreds of species sat in floating chairs that could move around the space. "Honored counselors," Jang said, "we have a crisis. 23 colonies and outposts have gone silent in the past day. This is not equipment failure. This is something else." Counselor Thex Moran, a large reptilian creature who had lived for over 500 years, made a dismissive gesture. "Ambassador Jang, the Outer Rim has always been unstable. These things happen." "No, they don't," Jang said firmly. "Not like this. Not all at once. Something is systematically moving through Federation space, and whatever it is, it's heading toward the core worlds." Another counselor, this one resembling a giant butterfly, spoke up. "Perhaps we should send investigation teams." "I already tried that," Jang replied. "The teams we sent to the first missing colonies have also gone silent." This got the council's attention. For the first time in the meeting, the chamber was completely quiet. Back on the alien station, Nixandra was telling them more about the Devourers. "My people were guardians," she explained. "For millions of years, we watched the barriers that kept the Devourers in the empty space between galaxies. But the barriers were weakening, and we knew that eventually they would fail. So you built a new barrier?" Dr. Park asked. "We tried. We used all our knowledge, all our power to create one final wall of energy at the galaxy's edge. But it was only meant to last 1,000 years. We hoped that would be enough time for the galaxy to prepare." Lee felt cold. "And now the 1,000 years are up." Nixandra nodded sadly. "The barrier is failing. The Devourers are already inside the galaxy. Those missing colonies you spoke of, they're just the beginning." Dr. Park's communicator buzzed. It was Kim, calling from the ship. "Doctor, you need to get back here now. We just received a message from Admiral Ko. Something big is happening." As they helped Nixandra to the shuttle, she looked back at her ancient station one last time. "I failed," she whispered. "I was supposed to warn the galaxy, but I slept too long." "You warned us," Lee said. "And we're not giving up. Humans don't know how to give up." Nixandra looked at him with something that might have been hope. "You're from the Death World, aren't you? The violent planet that created warriors?" "We prefer to think of ourselves as survivors," Dr. Park said with a small smile. As their shuttle headed back to the Indomitable, none of them noticed the space around the station growing slightly darker, as if something vast was moving through the shadows between stars. The hunt had begun. Admiral Ko Sungjin stood in the war room deep inside Earth's military headquarters. Around him, holographic displays showed the galaxy with red dots marking every place that had gone silent. There were now over 100 red dots, and more appeared. Every hour. "How long do we have?" he asked Dr. Bejasu, Earth's top scientist. "Based on the pattern, maybe 2 weeks before they reach the core systems," she replied. "But Admiral, we have a bigger problem. The Federation Council is refusing to believe this is real." Ko wasn't surprised. The Federation had known peace for so long that most species couldn't imagine a real threat. They thought everything could be solved with meetings and trade agreements. "What about our fleet?" he asked General Yoon Kyongmin. 47 ships ready for combat," the general replied. "Not much against something that can consume entire star systems." Dr. Bay pulled up new data. "I've been studying the information Captain Lee sent about these Devourers. Our normal weapons won't work. They exist partially outside our reality, which makes them almost impossible to hurt with energy weapons or missiles." "Almost impossible isn't the same as impossible," Ko said. "What do we need?" The Veltar had weapons that worked. According to their data, they used something called quantum field manipulation combined with psionic energy. But there's a problem. Using these weapons requires a level of mental strength that most species don't have. Ko understood immediately. But humans might? Exactly. Living on Earth gave us psychological toughness that other species lack. We might be the only ones who can operate Veltar weapons without going insane. On the Indomitable, Captain Lee was learning just how bad things really were. Nixandra sat in the ship's main conference room, surrounded by human officers who were trying to understand what they were facing. "Show them," Dr. Park said gently to the ancient alien. Nixandra activated a small device from her station. The air filled with a holographic image of a beautiful planet covered in crystal cities. Millions of beings that looked like Nixandra were going about their daily lives. Then the image changed. Darkness began to creep across the planet's surface. But it wasn't normal darkness. It was something that seemed to eat light itself. As it touched the crystal cities, they didn't explode or crumble. They just became empty and gray. The people didn't run or fight. They stood still as the darkness washed over them. Their bodies remained, but something essential was gone from their eyes. They moved like sleepwalkers, with no purpose or will of their own. "They're not dead," Nixandra explained quietly. "Death would be kinder. The devourers consume the life, force, the soul, if you will, and leave behind empty shells. The bodies continue to function, but there's nothing inside them anymore." Lieutenant Kim looked sick. How many worlds did this happen to? All of them. Every planet in Veltar space. Billions of beings reduced to empty husks. Nixandra turned off the hologram. "The worst part is that the husks continue to work, to build, to serve the devourers. They become part of the invasion force." Captain Lee stood up. "We need to warn the Federation." "I tried," came a voice from the communication system. It was Ambassador Jang, calling from Zentara Prime. "The Council thinks we're overreacting. Half of them believe this is just some kind of natural disaster that will pass. The other half think it's a hoax." "What about the missing colonies?" Dr. Park asked. "They're sending investigation committees to study the problem. They should have their first report ready in about 6 months. Lee wanted to punch something. 6 months would be too late by about 5.5 months. On Earth, Dr. Bay was making progress with the Veltar technology. Captain Nam Hyunwoo, commander of the experimental ship Ragnarok, watched as scientists installed strange crystal devices throughout his vessel. "Will this actually work?" he asked. "Honestly, I have no idea," Dr. Bay admitted. "We're combining 1,000-year-old alien technology with human engineering. It could destroy the devourers, or it could turn your brain into soup." "Cheerful," Nam muttered. But he didn't back down. This was what humans did. They tried impossible things because someone had to try. The crystals hummed with power as they came online. Nam felt something strange in his mind, like an extra sense he had never had before. He could feel the space around his ship in a way that was hard to describe. "How do you feel?" Dr. Bay asked. "Different, but okay. Like I can see things that aren't there." Nam frowned. "Is that normal? For a human using Veltar technology? We have no idea what normal is." Meanwhile, Captain Cho Dongwan was piloting his stealth ship Ghost toward the outer rim. His mission was simple but dangerous. Get close enough to a devourer to gather intelligence and try to come back alive. As the Ghost approached the last known position of the mining colony at Kepler 7, Cho's sensors detected something that made him glad he was in a stealth ship. The entire star system was wrong. The sun was still there, but it was dimmer, as if something was draining its energy. The planets were gray and lifeless, and moving between them were things that hurt to look at. The Devourers weren't ships in any sense that humans understood. They were living creatures the size of moons, dark and shapeless, constantly shifting as if they couldn't decide what form to take. Around them floated smaller creatures that might once have been spaceships from various species, but were now twisted into unrecognizable shapes. Cho activated his most sensitive scanners and immediately wished he hadn't. The data that came back showed energy patterns that his brain couldn't quite process. The Devourers weren't just in normal space, they existed in multiple dimensions at once. No wonder normal weapons don't work, he muttered. How do you kill? Something that's only partially here? His stealth system started to fluctuate. Something was interfering with them. One of the smaller creatures had turned in his direction, even though he should have been invisible. Cho didn't wait to see what would happen next. He jumped to hyperspace and ran for home as fast as his ship could go. Back on Zentara Prime, Ambassador, Yang was watching her career end. The Federation Council had officially censured her for spreading panic and making unfounded claims. She was being recalled to Earth. As she packed her belongings, her assistant Orcs brought her one final report. The investigation fleet sent to check on the missing colonies has arrived at their destination, he said. And? They're not responding to communications. Jang closed her suitcase and headed for the door. Pack your things, Orcs, we're leaving. Where are we going? Home. Because in about a week, this is going to be the most dangerous place in the galaxy. As her ship departed Zentara Prime, Jang looked back at the Federation capital one last time. The great city ships sparkled in the light of the system's twin suns, beautiful and peaceful and completely unprepared for what was coming. Behind her, in the space between galaxies, something vast and hungry continued its approach. It had fed on 1,000 worlds and was still not satisfied. This galaxy would provide a feast that would last for centuries. The Devourers were patient. They had all the time in the universe. Captain Nam Hyunwoo felt his ship shudder as the Ragnarok dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of what used to be the Kepler system. What he saw made him understand why Captain Cho had run away. The Devourers were beautiful in the most horrible way possible. They moved through space like living shadows, their forms constantly shifting and changing. Around them, the twisted remains of Federation ships floated like dead fish in a poisoned lake. "Weapons online!" Nam called to his crew. The Veltar crystals throughout the ship hummed with power that made his teeth ache. "Sir," called his weapons officer, Lieutenant Park Subin, "I'm reading 17 large entities and maybe 50 smaller ones. They're not moving like ships." She was right. The Devourers moved in patterns that had nothing to do with physics or engineering. They flowed through space like water, sometimes passing through solid objects as if they weren't there. "Target the smallest one," Nam ordered. "Let's see what these weapons can do." The Ragnarok fired its first shot. Instead of the bright beam of a normal energy weapon, this one looked like a tear in space itself, a line of absolute darkness that reached out toward the nearest devourer. The creature writhed as the weapon hit it. For the first time since entering the system, one of the Devourers reacted to an attack. It made a sound that came through the ship's hull rather than the communication system, a noise like reality screaming. "It worked!" Park shouted. "The target is damaged." But their celebration was short-lived. Every Devourer in the system turned toward the Ragnarok. Suddenly, Nam's mind was filled with whispers that tried to tell him to give up, to stop fighting, to let the darkness take him. Mental. "Shields up," he ordered, activating the psionic protection Dr. Lee So-young had installed. The whispers faded, but didn't disappear completely. The Devourers began to move toward them, and Nam realized that humanity had just declared war on something that could destroy galaxies. Meanwhile, Commander Oh Min-jae was leading an evacuation on the colony world of New Busan. The planet was still inhabited, but long-range sensors showed Devourers heading their way. They had maybe 6 hours before the enemy arrived. "Move! Move! Move!" Oh shouted, as civilians ran toward the transport. "Ships! Leave everything except food and medicine!" The colonists were mostly human, with a few alien families who had chosen to live among the crazy Deathworlders. They moved quickly and efficiently because frontier life had taught them that sometimes you had to run fast or die. Dr. Park Hana, who had come down from the Indomitable to help, was treating refugees who had escaped from other worlds. What she saw made her sick with rage. "They're not physically injured," she explained to Commander O, "but something has been done to their minds. They respond to basic commands, but there's no personality left. No emotions, no memories, no humanity." She was treating a woman who had once been a Federation diplomat. The woman sat quietly, staring at nothing. When Park asked her name, she replied in a flat, emotionless voice, but when asked about her family, she showed no recognition at all. "The Devourers don't just kill people," Park said quietly. "They steal everything that makes them who they are." A few systems away, Captain Cho was making another reconnaissance run. This time, he was being more careful. His Ghost was equipped with new sensors that Dr. Bay had developed based on Veltar technology. What he discovered changed everything. The Devourers weren't just randomly consuming worlds. They were building something. In every system they had taken, massive biomechanical structures were growing out of the dead planets. The structures were connected by streams of energy that looked almost like blood vessels. "It's a network," Cho reported back to Earth. "They're turning the entire outer rim into some kind of feeding system." Admiral Ko studied the data with growing horror. "How big will it get?" "If they keep expanding at this rate, the entire galaxy in about 2 years." On the Indomitable, Nixandra was working with human engineers to modify more ships with Veltar weapons. But the process was dangerous. The mental strain of using the technology was enormous, even for humans. Lieutenant Kim had volunteered to test the psionic interface. As the alien crystals connected to his mind, he suddenly saw space in a completely new way. He could feel the life force of everyone on the ship, sense the energy patterns of distant stars, and detect the hungry darkness of approaching Devourers. "I can see them," he whispered. "They're not just in our dimension. They exist in multiple realities at once. That's why normal weapons don't work. You can only damage part of them." But the effort was taking its toll. Kim's hands were shaking and blood was running from his nose. "That's enough," Dr. Park said, disconnecting the interface. "We need to find a way to reduce the mental strain." Dr. Lee So-young had an idea. "What if we don't try to reduce it? What if we find people who can handle more of it?" She had been studying human psychology and the effects of living on a death world. Humans had developed mental resilience that other species lacked, but some humans were tougher than others. "We need volunteers," she announced. "People who have survived the worst that life can throw at them." The response was immediate. Soldiers who had fought in wars, explorers who had survived alone on hostile worlds, rescue workers who had seen terrible disasters, they all stepped forward. Captain Lee wasn't surprised. This was what humans did. When things got impossible, they found a way to make the impossible work. The first battle group of modified human ships met the Devourers at the edge of the Centaur system. Captain Nam led the attack with the Ragnarok, supported by 6 other vessels equipped with Veltar weapons. The battle was unlike anything in recorded history. The Devourers didn't fight like normal enemies. They phased in and out of reality, attacked with weapons made of pure fear, and tried to drain the life force from anyone who got too close. But the human crews held together. When one ship's psionic operator collapsed from mental strain, another took over. When the Devourers filled their minds with whispers of despair, they fought back with memories of home and determination to protect what they loved. direct hit. "On target 3!" Park called out, as another devourer writhed under the assault of quantum weapons. But for every devourer they wounded, 2 more appeared. The humans were fighting bravely, but they were massively outnumbered. "Sir," called the Ragnarok's sensor operator, "I'm detecting movement from the deep void. Something really big." Nam looked at his screens and felt his blood turn to ice. Moving toward them from the space between galaxies was something that made the other devourers look like insects. It was the size of a planet, and it was heading straight for the Federation core worlds. "All ships, fall back," he ordered. "We need to warn Earth." As the human fleet retreated, the massive devourer continued its approach. Behind it came others, equally vast and hungry. The advanced scouts had been testing the galaxy's defenses. Now the real invasion was beginning. On Earth, Admiral Ko received Nam's report and made the hardest decision of his life. "Send word to all human colonies," he ordered. "Full mobilization. Every ship, every weapon, every person who can fight. And get me Dr. An Byum-seok." Dr. An was Earth's most brilliant scientist, and also its most controversial. His theories about using planetary cores as weapons had been dismissed as insane, but insane ideas might be exactly what humanity needed. The Devourers were coming, and conventional warfare had failed. It was time to try something that no sane species would ever attempt. It was time to turn Earth itself into a weapon. Dr. An Byum-seok stood in the deepest laboratory on Earth, surrounded by equations that covered every wall. Above him, the world was preparing for its final battle. Below him, he was trying to turn the planet into the largest weapon ever created. "It will work," he told Fleet Admiral Yoon Hae-yoon, who had come to check on his progress. "But the cost—" "Tell me," Yoon said simply. "We'll need to channel the life force of every human on Earth through the planet's core. The quantum field generated will be powerful enough to sever the Devourer's connection to their home dimension. But anyone who participates in the process will die." Yoon was quiet for a long moment. "How many people?" 6 billion, maybe 7. Everyone except essential personnel on the orbital stations. And if we don't do this? The galaxy dies. Every thinking being becomes an empty shell serving creatures from another universe. Yoon nodded. "Then we do it. But first, let's see if we can buy some time." Above Earth's atmosphere, the largest human fleet in history was assembling. Every warship, every converted merchant vessel, every private yacht that could mount a weapon had been called to service. They were joined by ships from the few alien species brave enough to stand with humanity. Captain Lee stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, now designated as flagship of the Human Defense Fleet. Beside him, Nixandra watched the preparations with amazement. "In all my years, I have never seen such determination," she said. "Your species refuses to accept defeat." "It's not that we can't accept defeat," Lee replied. "It's that we've decided defeat is not an option." The enemy appeared, at the edge of the solar system like a wave of living darkness. The main devourer force was beyond counting. Entities the size of moons, accompanied by the twisted remains of every ship and creature they had consumed in their journey across the galaxy. "All ships, this is Admiral Yoon," came the voice over the fleet communications. "Today we fight not just for Earth, but for every living thing in the galaxy. Make every shot count." The battle began. Human ships dove into the Devourer formation like wolves attacking a bear. The Veltar weapons tore holes in reality, causing the alien entities to writhe and scream. But for every devourer that was wounded, 10 more took its place. Captain Nam, commanding a squadron of modified destroyers, watched his ships disappear one by one. The crews fought bravely, but the mental strain of operating the quantum weapons was killing them as surely as enemy fire. "We can't keep this up," he reported to the flagship. "We're losing too many people." On the planet's surface, Commander O was leading the evacuation of non-essential personnel to the orbital stations. Millions of people were being moved in the largest evacuation in human history, but millions more were volunteering to stay behind. "I've lived on this world for 70 years, said an old woman as O tried to convince her to leave. "If it's going to die saving the galaxy, then I'll die with it." Similar scenes were playing out across the planet. Families saying goodbye, children being sent to safety while their parents stayed to power the weapon that would save everything. Dr. Park Hana was working frantically in the medical bay, treating pilots who had pushed themselves too far while fighting the mental effects of Veltar technology. Some would recover. Others would never be the same. "How many more can we lose?" she asked Dr. Lee So-young. "All of them, if necessary," Lee replied quietly. "That's the choice we've made." In space, the battle was reaching its climax. The human fleet was down to less than half its original size, but they had managed to damage or destroy dozens of devourers. More importantly, they had bought time for Dr. An to complete his work. Captain Cho, piloting his ghost through the chaos, detected something new on his sensors. "Admiral," he called to the flagship, "I'm reading massive energy buildup from the planet's core. Whatever Dr. An is doing, it's working." On Earth's surface, the final protocol was beginning. Volunteers across the planet placed their hands on crystalline interfaces that Dr. An had built into every major city. As they did, their life force began to flow into the planet's quantum field network. "Phase 1 complete," Dr. An reported. "Beginning core ignition." The planet began to glow, not with reflected sunlight, but with an inner radiance that grew brighter by the minute. In space, the Devourers suddenly stopped their attack and turned toward Earth, sensing the growing power. "They know what we're doing," Nixandra said from the Indomitable's bridge. "They're coming for the planet." The largest Devourers, entities the size of small moons, broke away from the main battle and headed straight for Earth. The remaining human ships moved to intercept them, but there were too few left to stop them all. That's when something unexpected happened. Ships began appearing from hyperspace. Not human ships, but vessels from across the Federation. Species that had spent years dismissing humanity as violent primitives were arriving to fight alongside them. "This is Captain Thex's Moran of the Federation vessel Harmony," came a transmission. "We're here to help." "I thought the Federation Council ordered everyone to retreat to the core worlds," Captain Lee replied. "They did. We chose not to listen. Your species is willing to sacrifice everything to save us. The least we can do is stand with you." More ships kept arriving. The peaceful traders, the wise philosophers, the ancient diplomats, they had all found their courage at the last possible moment, but it might not be enough. The largest devourer was almost through the defensive lines, reaching toward Earth with appendages that could crack continents. "Dr. An," Admiral Yoon called from orbit, "whatever you're going to do it now." "Activating final protocol," Dr. An announced. The volunteers on Earth's surface felt their life force being drawn into the planet's core. Instead of fear, most felt a strange peace. They were dying, but their deaths would save trillions of lives across the galaxy. Earth became a star. The planet blazed with quantum energy that tore through the fabric of space itself. The energy reached out like cosmic lightning, touching every devourer in the solar system and beyond. Nyxandra, watching from the Indomitable, smiled for the first time in 1,000 years. "It's working," she whispered. "The quantum field is severing their dimensional anchors." Across the galaxy, the Devourers suddenly found themselves trapped in normal space-time. Without their connection to their home dimension, they were no longer invulnerable. Regular weapons could hurt them now. The largest Devourer, caught in Earth's quantum field, began to dissolve. Its scream of rage and despair echoed through space as it was destroyed by the very planet it had tried to consume. One by one, the other Devourers fell. Some were destroyed by the quantum field, others by the combined fleet of humans and their allies. The invasion that had consumed 1,000 galaxies was finally stopped, but the cost was enormous. Earth was transformed, no longer a world where normal life could exist. Billions of humans had given their lives to power the weapon that saved the galaxy. In the aftermath, Captain Lee stood on the observation deck of the new human capital on Mars, looking out at the stars. Beside him, Ambassador Jiang was reading reports from across the galaxy. "The Federation Council has officially apologized," she said. "They're offering humanity full membership and a permanent seat on the ruling council." "What did you tell them?" Lee asked. "That we'll think about it. After what we've seen, I'm not sure we want to be part of an organization that only finds courage at the last minute." Nyxandra joined them at the window. She had decided to stay with humanity, helping them understand the Veltar technology that had saved everyone. "Your species has changed the galaxy," she said. "Before this, most beings believed that peace meant the absence of conflict. Now they understand that peace must be defended by those willing to fight for it." Lee nodded. Across the galaxy, formerly, peaceful species were building defense fleets and training for battles they hoped would never come. The lesson of the Devourers would not be forgotten. "What happens now?" Jiang asked. "Now we make sure this never happens again," Lee replied. "We watch the spaces between galaxies. We stay ready. We remember that sometimes the greatest courage is being willing to sacrifice everything for others." At the edge of the solar system, a simple monument had been built from the crystallized remains of Earth's surface. The inscription was visible to every ship that passed. "To those who chose to fight when flight was easier, who chose to sacrifice when selfishness was simpler, who chose to hope when despair was more logical. The galaxy remembers." And in the deep void between galaxies, where other hungry things might still lurk in the darkness, human ships now patrolled in silence, watching and waiting. The Deathworlders had answered the galaxy's call for help. They would be ready to answer again, if needed. The galaxy was safe, but it was no longer innocent. And that, perhaps, was exactly what it needed to be.